Hello and welcome to the tutorial for World Watercolor Month on July 26th. Our prompt is C. This is a photo that I took on Lake Michigan, and I just love the colors and the way that that wave is just starting to crest over. And so I think this is going to be a great photo to use for our reference. I'm pausing here so that you can take a screenshot and then we'll get started. All right, I've got my palette laid out and I'm zoomed back a little bit so you can see there's going to be a lot of color choosing with this one. I'm probably going to clean this up. And so in order to do that, I'm just going to give it a little spritz. This is an easy way to clean your palette if you're going to be lazy and not take it to the sink and scrub it. And I'm not worried about getting it perfect. I just want to have an overall cleaner palette because we're going to mix up some kind of, I don't want to say pure colors, but kind of. In this one, we've got some beautiful blues and turquoises. So I just want to make sure that I have room for that. If you've seen some of my other tutorials, sometimes I like a really dirty palette. It just depends on the painting. All right, so that's done. My colors are hydrating. Go ahead and give your watercolors a spritz while we do our quick drawing. And this drawing is going to be really simple because we're just going to create a few horizontal lines. If you need to use a ruler for this part, go ahead. I'm going to just do it by eyeball, but you can use a ruler as well. As always, I like to look at my paper in terms of quarters or thirds. And what I notice is that thirds are going to be better than quarters because of where the horizon line falls. And so I'm just looking at my reference photo and I'm looking at my page and kind of where my landmarks are. If I divide this in half or I divide it in thirds. So if I go in thirds, I'm going to be at about, I'm just eyeballing it about here and about here. See, these are about equal. Equal enough. Same thing over here. So I've divided in thirds here. Okay, so my main horizon line off in the back falls at this top third of my paper. So I'm just going to draw a horizontal line across at that mark. Again, you can use a ruler if you want to. I'm not going to for this particular thing. Now, my main water comes at an angle, like my main kind of where that water meets the sand comes at an angle that starts just a little bit down. My page here is, I think I'm about a 5 by 7 roughly. I think it's a little more than 5 and right about 7. Just to give you an idea on the paper size that I'm working on. And so I'm coming down about a 1/2 inch because that's where this kind of white wavy foam starts at the far end of the picture. And it comes down here, and see, this is my third mark. It comes kind of, it's not quite at that third. It's a little lower than that if I look on my reference picture because this section is a little wider. So it comes maybe a 1/2 inch here. So kind of that way. And now I'm going to just very gently color in the line that goes like that. Okay, so this gives me my two sort of landmarks for where my horizon is and for where the wave is kind of breaking. That initial wave is breaking on the sand. And then we have the water that is receding back across the sand. And that starts kind of close here and it comes to about here. And it's not a straight line, but I'm going to draw kind of a straight line right now because that just gives me a landmark. And then what I'm going to do off of that straight line is I'm going to pull, I can kind of look at that reference photo and I'm going to see, okay, right here, it kind of pulls up and then forward and then back. But you see it's kind of wiggling along, but it continues to wiggle along this. And now I'm just this line, right? So, and actually some of that doesn't look quite right to me. And so where it doesn't look quite right, I'm just going to go ahead and fix it. I'm going to use my kneaded eraser. Actually, it's not bad. Okay, I'm just going to make some small adjustments. So this up at the top here, it kind of comes straight. My dip is just wrong. Comes straight and then it dips back and forward. And then it kind of, and each one of these, that's what's not quite right about this. Each one of these, remember, this is the horizon still. So this is, the land is kind of this way, and this water is crisscrossing across this line. And so it kind of comes these lines are a bit more horizontal. Some of these are a little too angled. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm saying that quite right. All right, so we're gonna go, and this is part of that drawing. For me, drawing is probably one of the harder parts. I don't naturally see the shapes, and so I have to work at this kind of hard. And so this is a part where I'm going to simplify this. There's a bit more going on here than I want. So I think I'm just going to simplify, and we're going to bring it out here. All right, there we go. And you see how I'm using that initial angle that I made in there. Okay, I like that. I'm going to get rid of that initial angle, and I'm just going to come along here. All right, there we go. Okay, so now I have my spot where this is a spot where the wave is breaking. This is a spot where the water is sort of receding. And then we've got this darker sand that kind of comes here. I'm not going to worry about that right now. All right, and then we have our lighter sand and our rocky line that comes here. I am going to mark that. And you can see that like this side spreads out more, like where it's originating from, and then it gets narrower here, and that's because we're looking off in the distance. So we have this kind of rocky, I'm just going to create this kind of, not scribbly, but kind of scribbly, textury. I'm barely touching my pencil to the paper. Okay, and we're going to keep this super, I'm really excited about this part. This is one of the things that I love about this beach because it's so fun to find rocks. So I'm just adding some little teeny circles here. Okay, our drawing is pretty much done. I'm not worrying about the pier off in the distance. I'm going to straighten this up a little because I can see it's got kind of a curve. Okay, now the last thing we're going to draw is at about halfway in the paper, maybe a little further, we start to develop this wave. And that wave is going to be a little tricky to paint. And you can see like this part is dark, right? So it's like where the water is meeting the sand. It does some interesting, does some interesting things here. Like here it kind of comes back and comes forward. I don't know if you're looking if you can look in the photo, you can see like we've got this white foamy section, and then right behind there, it's a bit darker bluey green color. And so that's what I'm trying to, okay, so it kind of comes out like this. I'm just trying to give myself an outline so that I don't lose it. I think it's easier to start with this ahead of time than try to figure it out when you're painting. And then what's interesting is actually right about here where this is coming forward, the dark comes forward. So it comes forward like this. And then it kind of swings back a little. And so it's doing kind of the same thing, like as the wave is rolling up on the shore, if you can imagine, the sand gets a little deeper here. It's like it drops a little. So like if you were walking here, you'd be in your toes, and then you step here and all of a sudden it's going to be like between your ankle and calf, right? And so it's because the water's just kind of pounding there over and over again. And so it creates this little ledge. And that's why you see this darker water. And it's part of what makes this picture so interesting, and because the colors I think are fantastic. So we want to make sure we kind of are marking where we're going to put that. Okay, so for this part of the wave, it's very white right here, right? It's foamy. And then it comes up at an angle like this because that's where it has already crested and fallen over. So we're just going to draw that. Now here, it hasn't quite crested, and so this line continues, but it's like really short. See how like here it's long and we've got the part where it's cresting and foaming, right? Oops, and we can kind of, there we go. And here we've got this line that's just narrow because it hasn't crested over yet. It's going to be really dark underneath of here, which is super exciting, right? And you can kind of see that darkness is going to come here, and then it starts to crest over here, and so you start to get this little white again right here, right? And then it falls over, so it's cresting here, and then it comes up, and then it's cresting here, and then it kind of disappears off, right, into the distance. My scale's a little off. This is a little wider actually than what's actually happening. So let's go ahead and adjust that. because I don't want it to take over the painting either. So I'm going to adjust this, make it a little shorter, come down, come up, down, and there we go. Okay. And then this is just a little dark. This kind of edges off into that darkness in the distance. Okay. I think we're going to leave it go with this. Let's start mixing up the paint colors. If you want to take a screenshot of my drawing, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to get rid of this. Now I want to make sure, yeah, that we're going to have to do some negative painting here. It's going to be a little tricky, but I think we're already into July 26th. I think you're ready for it. If you've stuck with me through all of these tutorials, I think it's going to be tricky but fun. And I'm going to start with my size 6. I'm not going to start with my biggest brush on this one because I think that I'm not doing a huge wash. We're going to do more colors switching out, and I just, my really big brush sometimes holds too much water, and I want to have a little more control with this. We are going to need a piece of paper towel for the clouds, so have one of those nearby you. Yep, just like I've just got a small piece of paper towel, I'm probably going to crumple it up. So you're going to want that nearby. All right, let's start mixing up our French Ultramarine, because this is what we're going to use in our sky mostly. And so this sky is a really soft color. Now, the actual sky has a little bit more kind of blue-green to it, so I might mix in, this is my Phthalo blue-green shade. So I'm going to mix that in. Let's make a nice pile of that. And so when I do my sky, what I might do, ooh, I've got like a little chunks of color. This is why I don't ever dip from my paint pan right onto my paper. I always make sure that I mix things up really well, because if I have a little like bit of pigment that's dried up and then I go to my page, I'm going to get like a really intense streak in that spot. I don't ever want that. I want to know the consistency of my paint before I take it to my paper. Okay, and so I think what we're going to do is let's just bring these together a little. Oh yeah, that's so nice. Okay, that's going to be our sky color. Maybe a little bit more of the French Ultramarine. Okay. And so here's the thing too about Phthalo blue-green shade and Phthalo blue-red shade are stronger pigments than my French Ultramarine. So my French Ultramarine is going to get lost in there more quickly. So I'm going to have to be careful about my ratios of color mixing. All right, I think this is good. I like that for our sky. And what we're going to do is just start with the sky, because this is the easiest part of the painting. And I'm going to start with my most intense color here, right? Because our skies tend to get lighter as they get closer to the horizon. And then I'm just going to add a little more water on my brush. I'm going to pick up a tiny amount of pigment, but not as much. I don't want it to be clear water because I want it to flow down pretty well. I'm going to, here, let's add water to everything. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Okay. And I've kind of missed this spot right here, but it's perfect because we've got some streaky clouds. And so it wasn't intentional necessarily, but it's just how my paintbrush worked. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to kind of make it like our clouds are kind of streaky. So if I wanted a really balled up cloud, I would make it in a balled up shape. But because we're kind of these elongated clouds, I'm going to kind of twist to make it a little longer, right? Like this. And then I'm just going to dip in like this and dip in like this. I'm going to dip where I'm whiter there. And the whole sky is got, you know, like right there. Like there's kind of a big batch of soft clouds there and off in the distance. And now I want this to be really skinny where I'm going to dip here. So I'm going to make kind of a nice hard edge because we've got this like this kind of cool cloud. I'm going to kind of drag. Oh, look at that. Isn't that cool? Okay. I think we're going to call that done. I don't want to overwork it. And I think this is nice and soft. And I'm really happy with that. We've got a little bit of texture. I like how it's a little darker at the top. The blue is a little cooler actually. So there's a little more French Ultramarine at the top. And it just sort of worked out that as it kind of moved down, we have a little more of that Phthalo blue green shade. Accidental, but I love accidents. Happy accident. But I'm going to make this a little whiter right here. Okay. And that's it. That sky is so easy, and it still has some movement and interest. So I love when things work out like that. Okay, if I paint in my sea right now, it is going to bleed into the horizon, and I don't want that to happen. So I am going to allow this to dry before we go on to the next stage. And so what I'm going to do is create an underpainting of where the sand is. And this is going to be a really, really, really soft, barely there paint. That's super important. And we're going to have to leave out some areas. So like right along this edge where we've got this white foam, we want to not paint there. I am going to lighten this up a bit more because I don't want my pencil to end up defining my edges. Okay. So we're basically going to paint from here to where this ledge is, because there is a lot of that yellow or purple. As it gets off in the distance, it turns a little more purple. So it's a little more golden color up front. And when things go off into the distance, they kind of get grayed out a little. And so yellow and purple are across from each other in the color wheel. The little color theory. So they start to neutralize and gray out as they get farther out. So the two colors that we're going to use for that are our Indian red. So if you have this like brownish red, and then I'm going to use this Quinacridone gold. Now Quinacridone gold is a really strong color, so I'm going to have to be very careful about using it super lightly. So I'm going to make 2 piles of that. Okay. We have a pile of our Indian red. Now the Indian red color is a Daniel Smith color, and I don't use this all the time, but I need to use it more because it's so pretty. And this is almost like an underpainting. And then here's our Quin Gold, which is super strong. So you can see I am only taking, look at, teeny amount of paint, lots of pigment. So I'm just going to have to be really careful with that. And we may end up using, to give ourselves a little more purple, and this is where like, okay, I'm going to use a little tiny bit of the French Ultramarine. That's just going to ground us, right? So I'm going to pull a little bit in there, and I'm going to pull a little bit in here, but not much. Oh yeah, that's pretty. Okay, so this is a nice soft color. And then let's pull in our Indian red down here. Another little pile. Okay, I'm just kind of playing with my color mixes here. All right, I think we're pretty good. And then maybe a little bit of just plain Quinacridone gold. All right, we are going to make the softest underpainting ever here because we don't want this to, we're just providing a base for the color that we're going to build up later. All right, so over here, this part is very white, so I'm going to make sure that I just come up to this line and I don't paint, I'm not going to paint past that, right? And so, and you see how this is really nice and light, and same thing here. We've got this like white line here. We're going to leave that white, and I'm going to kind of come this way, and now it gets, as it moves closer to the shore, it gets a little bit warmer in color. So I'm going to just kind of tip some in there. Now my paper is dry, but I'm going to work with my paint, and I'm going to try to keep a really wet edge on my paint. And I'm just kind of mixing back and forth between my soft Indian red and my Quinacridone gold here, and I'm just adjusting the color as I go. So like this is actually really kind of yellowy here, and so I'm going to pick up a bit more of the Quinacridone gold here. Yep, and then we've got kind of a big rock pile, which is really cool, and it's kind of warm and golden. We're going to leave that rock pile out, but we're going to just paint this kind of warm and golden color. And then this warm gold color actually extends underneath of here in this really cool swoopy mark. So we're going to do that. And we're going to take that color, not all the way to that edge, but pretty close to it. Now right above it is this more purpley gray color. So I'm going to have a little bit of this like softest colors ever, right? Let me get a little more Indian red. There we go. And I'm mixing a little bit of my French Ultramarine into there. And I'm going to paint in here, but I'm going to be careful not to paint. I'm going to leave that edge right here free. And remember, this is almost all white up there. That blends together. If you get a little too much color, like I've got a little too much color here, you can always take your paper towel and just do a little blot to soften it up. Right now I'm just developing my, and I'm going to let this touch. Okay, and it gets, so remember it's really golden, and then it gets to be a little more pinkish in color on the other side here. So we're going to do that. I'm going to let that come in this way, and I'm going to let this just kind of finish out this way, and a little more purple, so a little more blue here. Okay, And what I want to do is take this all the way to this edge. We're going to let it dry, but I'm going to take it to where the edge of where that foam and that wave is coming over. And so I'm going to make sure, now this is starting to dry, so I got to jump back in here. You can't let your edges dry, so you're working them at the same time. And you're trying hard not to, you're trying hard to leave it wet. This is this really pretty golden-y orangey color. So I'm going to mix up my 2 Indian red and Quinacridone gold. And we're just going to make a nice kind of golden color. This is a little stronger because it is in the picture. And as we get to this edge, because it's wet there, it gets a little more, oh, that's too much, but let's just pull off some pigment. There we go. And that's going to be right here. And it's going to go right up to where that white foamy edge is, right? And I'm just going to kind of dance my brush in there. There. Okay, look at how pretty that is. We've developed our shore. I'm going to join together the color a little bit here because it kind of, oops, a little too much. Because it kind of does. Okay. All right, I'm going to leave it alone. Now on this side of things, we've got these rocks here and they're like a really soft gray color. So do you see how I've got the little bit of French ultramarine is left on my palette and I have my Indian red here? That makes this beautiful kind of gray color. I'm going to come in like this. Whoops. And I'm just going to, this is where we're going to kind of establish those rocks. And then the sand on the other side of this gets a little warmer. So I'm just going to pull into this bit warmer mix. And we're going to bring that up to here. Okay, so what we've done is we've created our first set of washes for this sandy area. And we're using these different colors that are flowing in together beautifully. We're going to leave this part probably how it is, pretty close to how it is. We might do a little bit of detail work in there. This we're going to really develop with those and then here we transition to those blue greens and the actual ocean. So I'm super excited. I'm really happy with the way this looks. We are going to let it, now we're going to let this part dry and we're going to work on this. So we jumped around from here so that I could have a hard edge here, and now we worked here, and now I can have kind of a hard edge here where I need to. Now we're going to mix up our turquoisey blues. Hang on just a sec. I have a dog who is insisting on laying between my feet. I'm standing at my table. It's a little tricky. You probably didn't need to know that, but this is what I'm struggling with at the moment. These things you can't see on camera. Okay, I'm going to pull up my French ultramarine. We're going to start with that. And then at this one side of the horizon is almost a little purpley. So we are going to dip our brush into, and we're just going to leave this over to the side, this Indian red. Now I could pull in like a purple or a Quinacridone rose, or like purple would be pre-mixed, right? And I could pull that in really easily, but by using the same red that I used in the sand, I'm uniting my palette better. Okay, see how, oh gosh, see how now I'm using the same colors that I've used everywhere else. My painting is going to be very cohesive from top to bottom. This is why it's so important to limit palette. Okay, so let's start with this, and I want to get it, it needs to be a little deeper because this is dark. And so there we go. Oh, I just love that. That's so pretty. And it's really darker here. Look at that. Oh, I love it. And then it gets a little lighter as we go here. So I'm just going to let this meet in the middle there. And now I'm going to add in some of my, as I move closer to the shore, it just is more like a blue-green color. And there is a, there. So see how we're flowing together? Now I'm going to mix my blue-green color into my French ultramarine here to create the next kind of layer of color, which is going to come here. Now I'm skipping my brush on top, and I'm letting some of it bleed together, but I'm letting some of it stay a little sparkly. This picture isn't super sparkly off in the distance because it's kind of an overcast day, but I just think this makes it more interesting, and so we're going to leave a little bit of that. And now you can see what's going to happen is we're going to add in some yellow because this water actually has a ton of green in it. And so we're going to add some of that Quinacridone gold into here. I'm Look at how pretty that is. I love that. Okay, and we're gonna do a little more turquoise. We're gonna kind of transition between these. So I don't wanna go too dark. I'm gonna add a little more water, and I'm just gonna come here, and it's just going to transition. Whoop, needs a little more pigment here. And if you need to take it all the way back, like here, my edges are dry. I'm talking a lot. So when you're talking a lot, like this, edges start to dry and then they don't flow together. So we're just going to add a little more yellow in, and I'm just going to pull that into here. Oh, it's so pretty. And by the time we get up to this front, it's almost golden. And I'm going to add a little more water. Now, there we go. We have established our water, and I'm not gonna mess with it too much more. I'm gonna kind of just leave that. This is the thing, like, it would be, see, I want to go back in. You got to be really careful. Now, if I brush back in here, I'm probably going to wreck it. So even though I've got a little bit stronger, like, kind of golden color than I wanted here, I'm going to let it alone because I don't want to wreck it. I really like what I have. Okay, so now, if you notice, this is like this yellowy color inside the wave and on the top of the wave. So I'm going to take a smaller brush. I'm going to take my, my size 4, if I can find it. Here it is. Okay, I'm going to use my size 4 pointed round. I'm going to get it wet, and I'm going to pull in a tiny bit of this color, but it's so watered down it's hardly there. And I'm just going to brush down. Do you see how, like, there's a white space? It's light, and then it gets a little darker here. And so I'm leaving a space. I'm leaving a space here at the top of where the wave is. And I'm just going to leave, I'm pulling in a little bit. But I want to be careful not to decimate my whites. All right. And so now I'm going to take that same bluey green yellow color. I got to get a little more quinacridone gold in here. There we go. And I'm going to, this is dark. And it outlines, there's a nice hard line. I'm going to get a little darker right here, right? And I made kind of like an L shape, a sideways L. And then it gets significantly lighter. And so I'm going to add a little bit of my Quin Gold. Ooh, see how strong that is? You got to be really careful with it. I'm going to add a little bit in here. I'm going to kind of bop it around down here to make sure it's, I don't want too much water in my brush, but I want a really diluted version. So like when I do that, when I add a bunch more water, I go back to my water, I tap my brush to my sponge so that my brush doesn't actually hold a lot of water. And I'm just going to pick up this very diluted mix. And I'm going to come right in here. And we're probably going to darken that up in the next stage, but I don't want to go too dark right now. Let's add a little bit. We're going to just we're going to charge in a bit of color here while it's nice and soft. Okay, and it gets a little darker, but I want to be careful, so I'm going to leave it alone. We are going to make that darker later, but I'd rather do it in layers. Okay, so now I'm picking up this kind of green gold color that's kind of in the middle of everything, and that is coming along this edge here where we're cresting over, and here where we're cresting over, and here. Okay. And I need to take a breath. It's a little stressful. Okay, now something really cool happens here. Up here, it's white and it has this like darker color almost right in front of where this is. So right in front of where we had our kind of white foamy. And then it gets really foamy in this area and it almost blends in. You can hardly see. It almost goes more to a gray. So I'm going to pull this in, this kind of grayed out mixture I had for the back here, and I'm going to pull that off of my palette, and I'm just going to dot that around in here. And I'm going to leave this really loose. I don't need to see any more than that. That's it. Okay. And then in order to soften this out, I'm going to soften it out like that. All right. Now, do you see how it looks like I'm really happy with this. We've established some great washes. Do you see how it looks like we've got our ocean is or actually Lake Michigan, right, is got this really deep blue that's going out to sea. This is along the shore. We've established that we've got these really beautiful turquoises that blend into this yellowy gold color. Now we're going to build more color on top of this, but this is our first set of washes. We're going to build in more value. So let's let this dry all the way so that we don't mess with the underlayers here. And then we'll come back in and do our mid values, and then we're going to paint this in 3 layers. So then our third layer is going to be our darkest values. That is the way that I handle most landscapes. And so I do a combination of soft edges and washes on those first layers, and then when we come back in, I'll do mid values with some charging of color, and then the final layer are going to be the details. Those are going to be the darkest details, and they're going to have maybe some harsher but harder lines. All right, so I'm going to put us on pause and I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, your paper should be 100% dry. Go ahead and give it a feel. Mine's pretty dry, or dry. It's all the way dry. Not 3 hours dry, but it's 30 minutes dry. And what I'm looking at is when things dry, sometimes they you look at it and you go, okay, I need a little more color here, a little more color there. And so what I think is that I really love how yellowy I am here, but I want a little more turquoise here. And so what I'm going to do is glaze turquoise from the edge of these waves all the way, kind of, well, like right from here back to here. And I'm going to do that by using a really light version of one color. I'm going to use my size 6 brush because I want it to be a little bigger. Because I'm going to do one smooth glaze, and I'm going to do that by using just this blue, phthalo blue green shade. And do you see how light and watered down it is? It is so light and watered down because I just want to do a really soft glaze. And the reason I'm going to start at the back, even over here, there we go. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's just right. I'm going to make sure that there's enough water on my brush that this flows pretty well, but not so much water that I'm going to cause water blooms, because now we are painting one layer on top of the other layer. We're glazing, and we can, if we're not careful, we can disrupt what's behind us. Now, if you're happy with what yours looks like, don't do this. But for me, I just feel like there's too much separation. There's too much yellow here, and I don't have enough of the turquoise color. So I'm going to fix that by I'm going to start at the back. And I'm just going to very softly come across and just bring this color. Oops, I need just a hair more water. I'm going to have it be a little bit more diluted right across here. And it's going to come right up to the edge. Okay, I'm much happier with that. And now I'm going to leave it alone. The next thing is that we're going to develop this wave part a little bit more. I'm going to leave this. This is really indistinct over here. I'm going to leave it that way because this is not the important part of the picture. This area of our painting is going off in the horizon, which is often less distinct. And if anything, I'm going to come here and remove a little bit of color, or just kind of blend it down a bit, right? Because I don't want this to be the thing we're looking at. What I really want to focus on is this is the most interesting part of our picture. So this is where we're going to focus. I'm going to add a touch more. Now I'm just fuss budgeting because this is wet. Ooh, almost dropped it. I'm going to add a touch more here. Touch more of my purpley color. And I'm just kind of charging this in. Again, being really careful not to create a water bloom, which you could do really easily. Don't want to do that. Okay, now if you notice in the reference photo, there's a lot of like little wavy texture, like little dark little dots. We're going to omit that because that is not the important part. That's not what we want to focus on. We might add a little bit right here just to accentuate that this is this really cool wave. But what I don't want to do is get this part of the water so busy that we're paying attention to it more than we're paying attention to this part. All right, so let's switch back to, I'm going to switch back to my size 4, and we're going to start working on this. This, if you were like looking back at the overall picture, this is where we have some darker values, where this water is sort of curling over and meeting the shore. And so I want to work with those. I've got kind of a light highlight along here. I'm going to get rid of my pencil marks because I have some pencil marks that I had made there to preserve my white. which I have, and now I'm going to just get rid of them because I don't want to have those pencil marks in the final painting. Okay, so let's start here. So right here, there's a bit of a shadow coming here as the water is lapping and lapping, right? So, and it's like a dark green blue color. So I'm going to grab my Phthalo blue green shade into my Quinacridone gold. Now, here's the thing. This is a little, ooh, it's a little too green. I need it to gray out a little. Anytime we want to gray it out, we're just going to add a bit of this red. There we go. This is color theory. We're neutralizing green with red because they're across each other from the color wheel. Okay, so now, oh, I'm really happy with that. This is like this really nice color. And we're going to use that. It's going to be right in this base part right here. And it kind of, and it comes up to highlight, because it's shadowed, right, where this water spray is coming. And then what's interesting is it has a lightness right up here, kind of towards the top of where that wave is cresting over. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab just a little bit of the softer version of this. It has a little bit more of the Quin Gold in it. I'm going to be careful not to have too much Quin Gold because, again, it's so strong. There we go. And that's going to kind of come up to here. Yeah, right like that. Now, here's the other thing that's interesting about this. And it's definitely pretty dark. I'm going to add a little bit more of that Quin Gold. I'm sorry. Okay, see right here, this space, this is pretty dark right here. This is some of the dark, and then right underneath of here, it's really dark. And so we're going to add this Indian red over here because we're going to use that to neutralize things. And I've got my kind of mix of green, goldy color, right? And I'm going to pull my Indian red in there. And over here, I'm just kind of pulling together the color to have this kind of in-between mix. It's not gray. It's almost like a brownish color, right? And it's going to come like this. And then, like, you see how it's like more red on the other side of here? It's because you're seeing the sand. It's still got green in it, but it's more red. And so we're going to carry that around here where this, and it's kind of a hard line. So I'm going to let's get a bit more of the, I don't know why my palette is being so goofy here. Okay. There we go. And let's pull up. Okay, now we've got like this almost purpley red color. That's perfect. And it comes in like this. And then it's going to go back to the greenish, like, see how we're mixing these reds and yellows? It's like a greenish gray almost, and that is coming here. And so we're just going to soften it out like this. I'm almost dry brushing over the top of my other stuff. And some of it's a little more pink. And some of it is a little more to the green side, and I kind of like that. We want it to be kind of varied, right? And then this is foamy, so we're just gonna let it be foamy. We're gonna have to probably put a little bit of that foam back in there, but we can do that. Okay, and I can see that I need to actually make this even a little darker. So we're just gonna make this a little darker. And I'm just charging this in. Now, I'm going to make this, I'm going to pull my green down into this darker version of this Indian red, and basically I'm using 3 mixes. I'm using my, like, and we can reestablish our piles here, right? We've got our Quinacridone gold, our Indian red, which is like this red-brown color over here, and our Phthalo blue-green shade. These are the 3 colors that we are using, and they're really a set of primaries. They're just an offset of primaries, right? And so you see how when you start pulling these all together, this is what we're using for all of our water. Okay, so now I'm going to go more to the green side, and I'm going to keep working here because this kind of blends, and I want to blend that. And it kind of comes underneath where this is. And then we've got this water that kind of pounds down. So I'm just like using the tip of my brush to dab, right? Right here, we're just dabbing. And then it comes darker here. All right, see how we're establishing that? That looks so good. And then this spot actually has a little bit more of the blue gray. So we're gonna go back to this original blue gray. And the reason it's this blue gray is because it's reflecting from the sky. And so we're just gonna come in and I'm going to make that really soft. This is what I love about this picture. There's so many cool colors, but they can all be made using, this whole painting is 4, right? We're using just 4 colors, which is so fun. All right, and then, and now I'm gonna take my Indian red over into this like French that's kind of like a leftover French ultramarine, so that it's a little more Indian red, and it's gonna kind of come down, and you see how like there's some, like horizontally, like the water's pulling back. So we're just going to kind of do that. Now I don't want to do too much of that right now because we're going to add that in a bit later, but I'm just kind of establishing the darkness and blending it in there. Now with a little bit of this French or this Indian red, like this last mix, I'm pulling into my Quinacridone gold so that I'm mixing up my dirty brush into this like kind of cleaner puddle of paint, and I'm just going to swirl that around here. And I'm dancing my brush, and I'm keeping my brush pretty horizontal because water moves in a horizontal way. Yeah, and we're just dancing. Now it's a little more purple, so I'm going to go back to this purpley color, add a little bit more of the Indian red, and I'm using the photo as my guide for the colors that were, and you see how now I'm going to establish this is foamy, but by not, and it kind of is foamy in like a triangular shape, so I'm going to kind of keep that there, like that. Ready? And to the side, I'm going to let it be a little bit more, there, a little smooth. So I'm adding some water to smooth that out. Oh, I love it! I know this is a very hard tutorial to talk through because for me, this kind of painting is very intuitive. And so I'm just really I'm really concentrating on the colors in my reference photo. I'm not necessarily concentrating in making every pattern correct. I'm going to just add like kind of a swirly mark there because it is kind of swirling. And I'm just going to kind of swirl around here and pull it. It kind of pulls this way. And it's actually a little more yellow there. And so it's hard for me. It's really hard for me to talk through some of this. These are really hard tutorials to give because I know what I do to create the painting, but giving instruction on it is just trickier. Now this area has this is a thicker foam line and this is a thinner foam line, so I'm going to kind of come in and with my paint, and I'm going to make this line a little bit less. Add a little water and soften that up a bit. But I'm going to be careful. When you add a little water to soften up, you got to be careful because we've got all of this, these underlayers, and we don't want to water bloom and do weird things. Okay, so I'm going to leave this be. I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. And when we establish this backside a little bit more, it's going to be a bit more glowing. Okay, so I've got everything white right here. I'm going to use just a bit of this soft yellow. It's kind of dirty. And I'm going to paint right along in here, just this yellow, right? Because, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. We've got this yellow that's kind of falling in, right? There. And it's glowing. That's what I love about this picture is we have these glowing yellows. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. Let's make it glow. Okay, now what you'll notice is it starts to get softer back here, and so we're going to pull in a little bit of we're going to make this a little more gray. Do you see how I'm just like swashing around my palette? A little more yellowy gray though, and I'm going to pull some of that. I'm going to add a little water to make that a little softer, like I want it to be barely color. I'm going to pop that down here. I'm using all of my palette, and I'm just going to soften up this a little bit so that we have a line that, you know, on our shore, but it's not quite sticking out as much. I don't love that. Okay, so now I'm going to take my paper towel and just pull some of that back. Okay, actually I'm going to leave that alone. We're going to let that fade off into the distance. Let's focus on this area next. Okay, so behind where this late wave is curling over, there's like a darker, there's a darker bit of water, and it has very much a wave pattern to it. It is a blue-green, so we're going to pull our blue and green together here. So I've got like this nice almost turquoisey, that's maybe a little, and I'm going to pull in a little more yellow because I think we have a little more green. Okay, I like this. This is a great color mix. So we're going to look really carefully at the picture, and it kind of starts back here and it triangles kind of up and down, right behind where this is, and then and so I'm just looking at my reference photo. This is a little dark, but that's okay. And I'm kind of adding, there's some like, this is very wavy right here. And so there's some little bits of like kind of triangular shapes back here. And so I'm trying to emulate that, but not match the reference picture exactly. This is where that gets widest, and so it kind of comes like this in this triangular shape that goes like this, and then in another triangular shape that goes like this. And so there's this little bit of space between these. Okay, and then there is like the thinnest, almost blue. I'm going to come back here with my French Ultramarine here, and it's going to be super light. So I'm going to make sure it's super light, and it just comes right on the back side of this wave. And it's more blue than anything else that's up front here. And it's barely there. And it kind of shapes like, ooh, that was not quite right. All right. There. Okay. Everything else up here is actually relatively green, but that spot was a little bit blue. I can see that it's a little more yellowy, and this kind of continues a little bit here. So I'm just going to let that continue a little bit here, and I'm just going to bring it like that, just to kind of continue that line in that yellowy color. And there's a little bit, we're going to just add a little bit of roughness here by letting our brush dance. But remember, we're not going to do too much of this because I think it's going to distract from our picture rather than add to it. Okay, and then here I'm going to pull in, I want to create a little more depth here, and so towards the bottom side I'm going to pull in a bit more intense of our phthalo blue-green shade, and I'm just going to come right along the bottom of here. Okay, that was a little maybe too intense, but that's okay. All right. It's going to add some nice contrast. If you, like me, have done it a little more strongly than you want to, you can always grab your paper towel, just give it a little dab to clean that up. Actually, after the dab, I really like it. All right, and now we're going to go back to our yellowy gold gray, right, by just coming to the middle of our palette here and pulling up that, and we're going to put a little bit of dimension in here. So there's like a spot, actually it needs to be darker than that. I'm going to get a bit of my Indian red, a little bit of my phthalo green blue shade, and a little bit of my Quinacridone gold, just very small amounts, right? And I'm just going to come here and mix up a bit more intense color. More blue, I'm adding a little bit of red to mute it out a little bit, but I want it to be to the green side here. And right here you can see that there's like, and we're just going to do a little dots, right, to develop this foam. And there's a spot right here where it's kind of like receding. So we're going to go like this, and I'm just going to do 2 little lines. That's it. And that shows that the water's falling over. And the same thing here. I'm going to do 1 line. It's like a little triangle. Okay. Do you see how we're starting to give dimension to this? And if it's too strong, you just take your paper towel and you just kind of blot at it. We're just establishing where those colors are to get movement. Now we're going to go more yellowy. And you can see we've got yellowy and some green. So we're going to use both yellow. I'm going to use some yellow and green. We're going to go kind of back and forth. we're going to develop some lines here because this is falling over, and you can see that there's like those, you can see the water kind of splashing, and so we're just pulling some lines. And the reason I'm leaving this top part, I'm starting my line from the top part and I'm pulling them down like this. I'm using my photo as the reference. This one is a little more like flat because it's coming a little flattened out, and maybe it has a little bit more blue-green color in one of these spots, like right here. Oop, too much. Again, just dab it away. Okay, so what that does is it kind of establishes, and then I'm going to establish a little bit again to the back. This is coming over. We can see that it's foaming here, and then you see how that golden color kind of travels all the way to the edge. So I'm just going to kind of fill in. That's going to, if you want to make something look whiter, you have everything around it be a little darker. So that's what we're doing there. Here I've got this grayish color happening. Let's give this a little bit, we're going to, same thing underneath of here. We're going to develop that by adding a bit of this like kind of gray, red, green color. We're going to darken up some of this. That's going to give me this really nice, like, hey, this is a wave that is rolling over. And we're just going to let it kind of fade off here. And add a little more darkness. And I'm just going to keep building it up. You notice I could just go like really dark with my brush right to start with, but then if it's too dark, I'm kind of stuck with it. And remember, this phthalo blue-green shade is a very staining color. I've added my Indian red right to the middle of my palette, which has a lot of green and yellows, you know, that blue, and so it's already automatically going to gray out. And so I'm going to use that maybe with a little yellow. There we go. Oh, I like that. That's a really pretty color. Okay, and that is going to come along here. Okay, it feels really dark, but we want it to be because that helps establish. And with my tiniest tip of my brush, I'm kind of right underneath of where that wave is. And then we're just going to kind of come out. Now, the thing that's interesting is there's a reflection of this white capping, which is really cool. And so we're going to just kind of create an illusion of that by pulling down some color here so that we're darkening up. And you see how we're leaving the middle parts white. And I'm using my photo as kind of a guide. And let's say I'm going to add a little bit more darkness. Here we go. So see how now we've got like this reflection. And now we're swirling in. That helps to create more foaminess here. Oops. I've gotten rid of my little reflection here. Okay, and we might do a little bit of lifting here to make that a little stronger. What I'm losing here is my green, so I'm going to pull some of this blue into this yellow and make kind of a strong yellowy green color, and I'm just going to pull that in here because I'm kind of losing it, and I don't want to do that because that's a really cool part of this. But I'd be careful not to muddy this up because it's starting to get a little muddy. Okay, now I'm going to pull into this kind of green, just muddy mix here, and we're just going to kind of establish a little bit of water pattern by bouncing our brush around here. This shows that there's movement, and I'm kind of following the shape, this larger shape. There. Okay, I think we're going to leave it alone. We might go back and do a little more detail work. We might not, but I don't want to mess it up. I do know I'm going to darken some things here, but I'm going to let that dry first. So let's go to this part, our beachy part, which again is not the most important part. The most important part is this wave. So we don't want to overdo this part and have it take over. But I do want to add a little bit to it. And so I'm going to start with adding a little bit more of my beautiful green gold. There's already a lot of green here, and that's okay. And then we're going to add a bit of our Indian red so that we have this really nice sandy color. Oh, look at how when you mix those two together, how pretty that is. Okay, and we're just going to use that to kind of, I've had some weird things going here, so I'm just going to and again, this accentuates that foam. So I'm dry brushing along the edge to give it some nice texture right up next to that foam. So we're going to go like that. And then I'm going to add lots of water to my brush. And I'm just going to pull that this way. And I'm going to use horizontal strokes. I'm beating up my brush a little, but that's okay. And we're going to bring it kind of where to, and see how we've got some like really cool texture. We're going to bring that all the way back. Same color. Now we've got some rocks here. And so what I'm going to do is let those stay there. I'm going to just kind of come along here to establish my sand on this side. And I'm doing it all with this kind of more reddy, just this in-between color. It's really pretty. Okay. We're going to go through and we're going to define some of those rocks, which will make it really interesting. All right, super happy with where we're at. We're going to let this, I actually want to bring a little bit more of that darker purple color, like that purpley color right here, because that's what it is. And I'm just going to kind of bring it, like the water recedes back this way. So I'm just like edging my brush in this way, horizontally, right? And I'm making it soft. Okay, we're going to step away, let it dry, and then come back and do the final details, which is going to be add a little dimension in the rock, a little more dimension around here, and then we're going to be done. I'm really excited about how this is turning out. I hope that you're having success too. This is a bit challenging in terms of painting. I think that anything like this where we're using a combination of washes and mixing of colors and soft lines and more, and harder lines, it's just a challenging paint. So if you feel like it's not turning out, stick with me and then practice this one a few times. I repaint things all the time in order to to learn each time. Each time I paint, I learn. So when I have something like this, I'll probably paint the same image many more times, because each time I do it, I learn something new. All right, let's let this dry and I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, our painting should be all the way dry. Mine's all the way dry. Now we're going to go in and add just our darkest values with some details. So we're going to work a little bit on some of the rocks here, and we're going to add a little bit of darkness here and a little bit along the edge of our kind of foamy section. And our foam on this painting does not mirror our reference photo exactly by any means, but we're just giving the idea. Our reference photo is what we use to take a look at and say, okay, what do I need to put in my picture? And then your painting is going to be different. The reference photo really is just for inspiration. All right. I like to say that because I think sometimes we get so focused on trying to make it exactly the same, and that's not the goal. All right. So for our rocks, the rocks that are scattered in here, I'm going to get a really nice big pile of my Indian red and my phthalo blue green shade right over here, and I'm going to mix those together. And we did use French Ultramarine, so we can always pull a little bit of that in if we want to cool it down a bit. Oh my gosh, look at how beautiful that gray is. All right, and some of the rocks are a bit more red, and they've got like reddish tones to them. Some of them are a bit more blue, some of them are a bit brown and golden, but we're going to kind of not worry about that so much, and we're just going to use this kind of gray color, and we might just push to other sides to pull up some other colors. So we've got these kinds of piles of rocks here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some more water out of my brush. We're almost going to kind of dry brush. We're doing some negative painting right now. So we're painting around the shapes of the rocks. I'm leaving the top. And we're just giving the impression. I'm just kind of dotting around, and I'm making some sort of C or like really gentle U shapes, right? And I'm connecting some and I'm not connecting others, and sometimes there's just a little dot. And so do you see how this just gives the impression of rocks? We are not trying to create exactly rocks. Now I'm going to tip in a little bit more to the red side because I want to vary these colors a little bit. So in here I'm going to just kind of do a few, and as I get off to the distance I'm just going to dot a couple. And then here I've got a few spots where I'm going to create like maybe a bit more distinguished rocks. Here is one and here is one. And so we're just kind of creating this idea. We're painting the bottom shadow part of the rock, and we're leaving, now I'm going to push it to the blue side, because I want to kind of vary back and forth, because the rocks are varied. And some of these are a little darker, and so we're going to let them be darker, especially as we get closer up. They're going to get a little bigger, because when they're closer to us, we can see them more distinctly. And you see how like we've developed, without even really painting rocks, we're developing the idea that there are rocks sitting here. This is what I think is so exciting about watercolor, is that you have the ability to do this. Okay, we're doing just a couple dots. And then there are a couple of rocks that are sitting here and they're wet. And I want to paint in a couple of those, because it's not just in this. I'm just going to kind of dot in. I'm using these mixes to have this nice gray. And there. I don't want to do too much. All right. I think that's good. That gives us a little texture, a little interest. There are a lot of rocks in the picture. We're not going to paint that. I'm going to paint a few more out like here and here. Okay. All right. That's it. And I think we have this really nice, maybe I'm going to, okay, so I'm going to dull this down. See how this is much lighter over here? And I'm going to do just a few over here too. But I'm going to just, it's going to be a little less like softer, a little less distinct in that background. And maybe if you like that. Okay. And I've got some of these, there we go. Okay. Oh my gosh, I love that. That was so easy and just like really tiny little brush strokes, those little kind of very wide C's or U's, and it just creates some shadowing. If we wanted to, we could go in and darken those up. I don't want to. I don't want to make this a star. This is a star. Okay, so now we need to make a kind of a dark, very narrow little line underneath of that foam, and it is a gray color. So we're going to pull out our red, Indian red, phthalo blue, and a little bit of quinacridone gold. Because to make a gray, use your 3 primaries. And these, while they're not a, oh, see, I like how that's a little to the green side. But, okay, there we go. We're going to make this a little dark. I'm just playing with that mix a bit. I think I need to scuff up my palette. Because it's not, there we go. Okay, maybe a little more red. All right, this is a nice gray, and we're going to come in, I wanted a little gray green. There we go. Okay, so right here, this is dark underneath of here, and that darkness comes right here where that foam is, just underneath. And it really, it helps to give definition and make our foam seem really nice and bright and white. And so we're just going through, and up here a little, there's like one spot where it's separating, and then coming here, and I'm just dotting around. Just to kind of create this shadowy line where that foam is folding over. And then there's a little bit of that up here. We're going to kind of do the same thing where we're just making it really distinct, like so that you can see that that's what's happening here. And then this kind of blends on out. Okay, where we see this again is right here. But it's a much softer version and it's a bit warmer. So I'm going to take this color and push it down. I'm going to add a little bit of the Indian red. Okay, and so now, and because I'm kind of messy here, and so I want to just kind of reestablish, this isn't in the picture so much, but I'm going to do the same thing, where I'm reestablishing this sand is wet, because my lines have kind of blended, and I want my sea foam here, where it's lapping up on the shore, to be a little more distinct. And so I'm just going to come in, it's swirling here and there. And then I'm going to add a bit of my quinacridone gold in there to make this like goldeny sand color, and I'm going to edge this out a little. a little more water in my brush. Not too much though. It's a little too much. Got to really modulate how much water is in your brush. And we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to kind of bring this out. And if you look in the picture, it kind of, you know, like you've got the sand is a little bit wet here anyway, where the water is receding. Okay, and now I'm going to do the same thing down here. Just a teeny bit, just to really accentuate that this is this foamy, wet stuff. Okay. And I'm just playing here. My strokes are very horizontal because water comes in and out horizontally. There we go. Okay, I think we are going to leave this alone. I don't want to, we could mess and mess and mess, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to overwork it and then all of a sudden feel like, oh, I really had this beautiful picture and then I overworked it and now it's not what I wanted it to be. There's some really cool like swirly parts in here, and so that is one thing we're going to do. I'm going to grab, we're going to do a little bit of lifting right here and right here. I'm going to get this is an angle brush. It's a 1/4 inch Princeton Velvet Touch. This is my favorite brush for doing any kind of lifting because it's pretty stiff. And it's got this angle tip on it, so it, to me, works really well. I'm going to grab some paper towel. Works really well to be able to scrub in, but I have a lot of control over where I'm scrubbing. So I'm going to scrub in right here. I'm just going to scrub my paper. Now I'm using 100% cotton paper, so I can scrub pretty well. And you see how that's developing, and I'm going up and down because my shadow, not my shadow, but my highlight is up and down. And I'm just doing it right at the edge where this foam is, and I'm going to do it here. And I'm going to have to do it a few times, right? And I'm just going to go like that. And you see how that is creating a highlight in the water to show that we're seeing this foam. I'm just going to go like this. And sometimes it takes a few tries. You want to be careful not to damage your paper. So if you feel like your paper is starting to get damaged, then stop. All right, that creates kind of a cool, and this is like a weird, I've got kind of a weird, this is where I'm just going to make some adjustments. But I'm going to be careful about those adjustments. Right here I've got this weird, I'm going to blend this out a little using this brush. And I'm just going to kind of scrub up my paper a bit. Just have kind of a weird, my paper can take this. I've got really high quality paper. That's why using quality paper is important. There we go. I'm just going to blend it out. I've got like some kind of weird line there. And I'm going to let that come up into the foam a little here. All right. Same thing here. Now, I'm going to see if I can pull out a little bit of paint here. Sometimes people use like a knife to scrape out. I've never been successful with that. I always damage my paper. So if I don't use that method. The other thing we could do, if we wanted to like create a really white highlight right here where this foam is kind of coming in and swirling, I'm just using my brush to scrub and lift. But one of the things you could do would be to use and see how it swirls back in here. I want to put a little bit of a circle here, so that it looks like it's swirling. Some people use like you could use a white pen. White gouache works well here. I sometimes use white acrylic ink. I think for this one, I can do what I need to do by scrubbing, so I'm just going to keep scrubbing. And see how I'm creating this like swirled pattern because it's in the picture and I really like that. Okay, I think I'm going to leave that alone because I'm worried if I continue, I'm going to maybe do a little bit here. I don't want to wreck anything. Okay, and again, this is, do not do this if you are using cheap paper. If you are using cheap paper, you are going to wreck your painting. Instead, then you can go back in with a little bit of white. Maybe we'll do that. Do you want me to show you how to do that? Let's do that. So I'm going to use a really tiny, not this one. I'm going to use a pretty tiny brush. This I think is probably a size 0. It's a little mini painter, so you can see it's like a really short bristles. And if you have white gouache, you can use white gouache. What I'm going to use that I really like using is this Liquitex. It's acrylic ink. You can see I have some already in here. I'll kind of let it dry on top of each other instead of rinsing it out, which is maybe a bad idea. But I'm just going to, it's got like a little dropper there. And I'm going to come in. So like if you've lost your white highlights, I'm just going to come in. You could do this with white gouache. I'm using my white acrylic ink. And you could come in and just like reestablish those with this. And I'm going to come in and make this like swirly, boom. I'm going to make these little dots because it's like this little foamy dot. I'm doing this pretty gently. I'm just dotting around. And you could do this in a couple of layers. I tend to work soft and by not doing too much. And I'm kind of looking at and this is where I'm using that reference photo to figure out the pattern. Right, and then it's kind of foamy here. But I've got a lot of white paper here, so I've done a pretty good job of preserving with my paper. You could also use a jelly pen to do this. I'm just going to come around and make little dots here because it swirls. And I just love that swirling effect. Kind of comes from here. See, it's coming from this like front edge here, and it swirls back and around. And I'm doing this so subtly. Oops, a little less subtly there. And then there's like a little bit of like, right, like an inner circle of kind of the same thing. All right. Ooh, see, I'm pretty happy with that. And then there's like a little bit of a boom. My sound effects. Like a little kind of almost like inverted V right here. And then this kind of comes back as well. There we go. And then there's a little bit more right here that kind of swirls back around in here. So, and it's just like little dots because the foam just kind of dots back. So we can add those little dots. Okay, and if you wanted to, you could reestablish some of this here if you've lost a little bit of that. And again, this is acrylic ink. I think my foam is actually bigger than what's on the actual painting, but that's okay. All right, or reference photo. This is the painting. We're going to call it done. I think this was probably pretty long, but I hope you stayed with me and that you had some success. Practice this. This is a great painting to practice because each time you do it, you'll have learned something new and you'll pick up some more brush techniques. This really does use like washes, glazing, values, establishing with some reverse, some reverse paint. You're painting around the highlights. I always forget that word. When you're painting around the silhouettes, I don't know why. Negative painting, sorry. So negative painting. So this uses a lot of different techniques. Definitely a challenge, but I think a challenge is worth attempting over and over again until you are happy with your results. Thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for July 27th. We are almost done. I'm super excited. I already have plans for next set of videos once the World Watercolor Month is over. And so make sure you hit subscribe so that you can see that starting on August 1st. All right. Have a great afternoon.